Good afternoon and good day wherever you're joining us from, for those joining us online. Welcome to the 2021 Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipation Summit, which is also the inaugural GESDA Summit. My name is Nanjira Sambuli. I am a moderator on the Diplomacy Forum at GESDA and your MC this afternoon. Just one house rule to keep in mind. While settled in a room like this, you do not have to have your mask on, but while moving around the premise, please remember to keep your mask on. This summit, you will learn about what GESDA is doing, how we're doing it by merging the academic and diplomacy communities, but also the impact and citizen communities or stakeholders. We'll bring discussions to the table about what science will bring in 5, 10, and 25 years, and start debating what kinds of governance mechanisms and frameworks we need to accompany this to make sure that all on Earth will benefit from these advances. And most importantly, we will listen to you, the audience, who are gathered here on what your perspectives are to enrich this program. So with that, I would like to invite a few speakers to welcome you all. First, I'll give the floor to Mr. Peter Brabeck, Chairman of Board of Directors at GESDA. Welcome.
Dear representatives of GESDA's founders, Ambassador Alexander Fasel, Swiss Special Representative for Science Diplomacy, representing today Federal Councillor Ignazio Cassis, Swiss Minister of Foreign Affairs, Swiss State Secretary for Education, Research and Innovation, Martina Hirayama, State Councillor of the Canton of Geneva, Nathalie Fontanet, Executive Councillor of the City of Geneva, Sami Kanan, dear representatives of the United Nations Organization, Mrs. Maria Francesca Spatulisano, representing the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, Mrs. Tatiana Valovaya, Director General of the UN Office in Geneva, dear President de la Fondation pour Genève, Mr. Marc Pictet, dear representatives of the academic and the diplomacy world, dear all GESDA guests here in Geneva and online throughout the world. On behalf of the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator, I am pleased to welcome you to the opening to the first Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipation Summit and to welcome you at Campus Biotech and online. 24 months ago, the founders at the origin of our organization, which are the Swiss and the Geneva governments, along with the authorities of the city of Geneva, entrusted us with a mission. That was to develop an instrument of anticipation and action in service of humanity in order to widen the circle of beneficiaries of advances in science and technology, and on the other hand, to strengthen Geneva as a preeminent hub for multilateralism. Accelerating the use of opportunities that advanced scientific explorations bring to the world seem straightforward. However, I must say, the 2 years since we have been working on this subject have proven us different. It was quite difficult. Firstly, and thanks to our scientific forum, co-headed by Joël Messon from ETH Zurich and Martin Betterly from EPFL Lausanne, we had to scout and discover what is already cooking in the laboratories all over the world. And secondly, we confronted this knowledge with our diplomacy forum, headed by Michael Möller, former Director General at the UN office in Geneva, to better understand the political and social implications those scientific breakthroughs will have to confront once they are ready to be applied in our daily life. In accordance with our mission, we have in fact developed two complementary instruments. First, an anticipatory instrument, the GESDA Science Breakthrough Radar, which offers an open source overview of the scientific disruptions in the making that will unfold their effects in 5, 10, and 25 years. It is signed by 543 scientists from around the world. It presents 216 disruptions that will very quickly impact all of our lives, wherever we live, whatever our age or our gender, in the digital domain, in the field of health, in the field of environment and science diplomacy. Secondly, an instrument for action, the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipation Summit, which is bringing together 900 participants, including 108 speakers from 33 different countries. Thank you all for your huge interest in participating to this inaugural 2021 edition and being with us today. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, into GESDA's anticipatory situation room, displaying for you on each wall of this room the content to be found in the radar about the 3 fundamental questions and the 4 scientific fields we have been working on for 24 months. The 3 fundamental questions that we have posed ourselves are: who are we as humans? What does it mean to be human in the age of robots, gene editing, and augmented reality? Second one was, how are we going to live together? Which deployment of technology can help reduce inequalities in this world and foster inclusive development and inclusive well-being? The third one was, how can we assure mankind's well-being with the sustainable health of our small planet Earth? How can we supply the world population with the necessary food and the necessary energy and regenerate at the same time our planet? Those were the 3 questions. Now the 4 scientific fields are advanced artificial intelligence and quantum revolution. The second one is human augmentation. Third one is eco-regeneration and geoengineering. And science and diplomacy is something perhaps relatively new. So the walls around you are reflecting the pulse of society on the one hand, on these topics and the related debates that has taken place, the pulse also of science, what is already cooking in the laboratories, and the first pulse of diplomacy on what could or should be done with these upcoming scientific disruptions. The goal of this summit is, based on the results presented in the radar, to open a first global consultation on these upcoming disruptions and their potential impact with you, ladies and gentlemen, representatives of the political authorities, the diplomats, the philanthropists, the entrepreneurs, the NGOs, and the citizens, and all the interested people throughout the world. We will focus during these 3 days on 16 of the scientific disruptions presented in this radar, so that you can work on solutions, initiatives, and projects that benefit everyone in the world and contribute to the achievements of the 7 UN Sustainable Development Goals. The first concrete solutions coming out of your thinking and your input will then be presented in a second breakthrough radar and in a second summit. Both are scheduled to take place in Geneva from 29th to 31 August 2022. Both our radar and our summit are being developed in close relationship and partnership with La Fondation pour Genève, represented here by its President Marc Pictet and Vice President Guillaume Pictet, and in close collaboration with a large number of partners, including, of course, our founders. I cannot mention here all our partners, but they are all listed in the RARA and on our website. But let me just thank the Open Science publisher Frontiers in Lausanne and the X Prize Foundation, established in California, whose CEO, Anousheh Ansari, is member of the GESDA Diplomacy Forum. X Prize is going to set up its offices in Geneva, here at the campus Biotech. We are working together to launch a joint public competition to develop quantum applications in collaboration with the World Food Programme, the UN Habitat, and the World Health Organization. So thank you, founders and all our partners, for your support and your trust. Let me conclude, ladies and gentlemen, by underlying a matter of fact. The speed of scientific and technological development is even further accelerating, and it plays an even greater role in our daily life. In order to fully take advantage of those advancements, we need to coordinate the complex relationships and interactions between scientists, politicians, citizens, and entrepreneurs, whose agendas, mindsets, experiences, and responsibilities are all very, very different. Geneva, with its UN headquarters, international organization, universities, and NGOs, is the ideal place to develop science diplomacy based on anticipation and participation by all. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Geneva. Welcome to our first Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipation Summit. And as we are saying at GESDA, let's all together use the future to build a better present. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Brabeck. And we'll now hear from Madame Nathalie Fontanet, State Councillor, Republic and Canton of Geneva. Welcome.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. On behalf of Geneva authorities, I am very happy to welcome you all, and I feel honored and humbled to be part of such an important event and among so many brilliant people. We live, I believe, a quite important moment in international Geneva's history, trying to create new bridges between science and diplomacy, between present and future, and between persons of such different backgrounds and origins as you are. The conversation about international public affairs is of concern to all. It has therefore to be as inclusive as possible. I thank GESDA for having made this inclusivity possible today. Geneva is the place to be when it comes to international cooperation. This is the place where some 600 international organizations, diplomatic missions, and NGOs address today's most pressing global challenges, be it climate changes, pandemics, disruption of humanitarian crisis. Geneva has always taken care to cultivate complementarity between the academic community, the scientific community, the private sector, and the organizations of international Geneva. The dialogue between science and diplomacy is not new, but it has become of major importance as the world faces new and rapid changes. This is the reason why the Canton of Geneva decided to contribute to the creation of GESDA. Geneva has strong ties with science and diplomacy, notably hosting the CERN and multiple international organizations. Therefore, it appears only natural to support GESDA as a connector between science and diplomacy, and as a way to propel the international Geneva to the future and to give it appropriate tools to be more efficient and elaborate solutions to global issues. It might be useful to remember that Geneva started more than 160 years ago, with the Red Cross, founded by 5 people coming from different walks of life, as well as a businessman, Henri Dunant, a lawyer, Gustave Moignet, a soldier, Guillaume-Henri Dufour, and 2 medical doctors, Louis Appia and Théodore Monnoir. Thanks to these doctors, science was associated with International Geneva as from its very beginning, and science's position only grew in the course of the 20th century. I am thinking here about the World Health Organization and all the other public health organizations that we host, but also about the World Meteorological Organization, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the International Telecommunication Union, and last but not least, CERN, of course. GESDA enters definitely in a fertile ground, a ground where it can count on the support of the host authorities, as well as on the resources of an outstanding network on local academic institutions. Geneva is also an operational hub. It is not only about speeches, reports, and resolutions. It is also about solutions, actions, and results. At a time when traditional multilateralism is put into question, this might be easier said than done. But I'm convinced that this is possible if we support all an inclusive approach, and above all, if we never lose sight of the ultimate goal, a better world, a more peaceful, just, and sustainable world for all human beings on all continents. Since the founding of the Red Cross, science, action, and humanity go together in International Geneva. There is no better place to pursue these efforts of inclusiveness and to bring the future that is being made closer to the issues of the present. I can only wish that GESDA be included in this long and ambitious tradition. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Madame Fontanet. We'll now hear a recorded message from Federal Councillor Ignazio Cassis, who's the Vice President of the Swiss Federal Council, Head of the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs.
Dear Mr. Peter Brabeck, Chairman of the GESDA Foundation, dear Ms. Nathalie Fontanet, Honorable State Councillor of Geneva, dear members of the board, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Swiss government, I want to extend to all of you, near or far, in person or online, a warm welcome to Switzerland. My government and the local authorities of Geneva created the GESDA Foundation 2 years ago. We felt, as the host state of one of the foremost centers of global governance and as a major global player in science and innovation, that there is an urgent need to fully capture what science and technology have to offer in terms of foresight, understanding, and solutions. The phenomenon of the convergence of sciences is expanding the field of scientific discovery and accelerating technological progress. This will change the face of humanity and hence change the way humanity is governed globally. Through the best possible interaction between science and diplomacy, we must acquire the ability to anticipate new technological challenges in order to design appropriate solutions and to turn new technologies into opportunities for each and every one of us. Moreover, geopolitical considerations come into play around science and technology. There is a growing feeling that a new Cold War is about to be fought over science and technology, and the power they confer to the states, they master them. We must, therefore, reflect on how we can adapt, evolve, and respond to the challenges and opportunities of our time. We need to build the global governance of the 21st century, which can only succeed if it is far-sighted, evidence-based, and equitable. In this spirit, GESDA is designed as a new tool in the service of effective multilateralism as a resource we wish to offer to the legitimate actors of international governance. The method is based on anticipation. The international community should be offered a good understanding of the challenges and opportunities ahead. The breakthrough radar you are about to discover certainly does that. The method is also based on participation and geared towards impact. GESDA facilitates, as an honest broker, the conversation between multiple stakeholders in order to build convergence around concrete solutions to practical problems. What we are trying to achieve with GESDA is new and hence difficult. To link anticipation that looks far ahead with action that is immediate is a major challenge in itself. And the method by which we are attempting to do it is new and challenging for the participating scientists, diplomats, policymakers, citizens, and representatives of the private sector and of philanthropy. But personally, I haven't seen any better proposal yet on how to use science diplomacy to make governance of world's affairs fit for the reality we are going to face. With GESDA, we are creating an instrument that is based in and operates out of Geneva. But the aspiration is universal. We are working for the global commons here in Geneva, and through the content and methodology we are proposing whenever and wherever the conversation is taking place. Thank you so much for your presence, interest, and participation. Let's set out together on the journey of anticipatory science diplomacy. Thank you.
I now welcome to the stage Yves Flückiger, the president of Swissuniversities, president of Campus Biotech Geneva Foundation, and rector of the University of Geneva. Welcome.
Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear friends of science diplomacy. On behalf of the Campus Biotech Foundation, which I have the honor of chairing, and on behalf of the two academic institutions that support the scientific project developed on the campus, the EPFL, the University of Geneva, as well as with the University Hospital of Geneva, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. It's a real privilege to participate to this open ceremony of this GESDA summit. Located in the center of international Geneva, close to so many international organizations, the GESDA is a perfect symbol of the project that led to the creation of the foundation in 2015. It is a dialogue between scientists and society, a meeting place between the expectation of international organizations, their challenges, and the solution that the scientific world can provide. A meeting place also for universities to hear the problem that this organization have to face. The recent pandemic has highlighted the importance of basic and applied research for our society. It's an opportunity, but also a risk in terms maybe of their autonomy. It's an opportunity, first of all, because science has been able to demonstrate since the early days of this pandemic that it could provide answer to these health challenges, and that it could also provide the advice that politicians and international organizations needed to develop effective, evidence-based public policies. Over the past 18 months, science has made what can only be described as an amazing progress in producing vaccines in a record time never before seen in the history of all viruses. This has been possible because mainly three factors. Firstly, it was due to unprecedented international collaboration, which remind us how vital it is for Switzerland to remain associated with the program Horizon Europe. And I know that our State Secretary, Mrs. Hirayama, is working very hard every day to make it possible. Secondly, open access publications that demonstrate that the importance of open sciences and the possibility of accessing the databases needed for research. Thirdly, it should be remembered that the reason why these new types of mRNA vaccines have been made available so quickly is that basic research on this subject began 20 years ago. This is an opportunity for me to emphasize that behind every innovation, there is basic research that cannot be financed by private companies, but must be taken on by the public sector. Science and politics, science and international organization, science and society must forge close links in order to face the social challenges of the 21st century. In this interaction, scientists must present facts on which they can give advice, knowing that they do not decide and that it is a politician who have the difficult task of making the decisions by weighting up the various parameters of this choice. Economic interest on one side versus health imperatives, a balance of costs and benefits that is not always easy to make. For this relationship to develop, it is necessary to build trust. This requires time. It also implies developing communication skills in the scientific world, remembering that sometimes the truth hurts, but that scientists must never be muzzled. In order to build the trust necessary for dialogue, to ensure that the message for the experts can be heard by the civil society, the role of the civil society, and not just the trained individuals, multidisciplinary and multi-institutional platforms must be built, linking sciences, politics, international organization, the private sector, and the civil society. This is precisely the purpose of GESDA, anticipating tomorrow's technological development to face current challenges and promote sustainable and inclusive development. GESDA's first goal is to anticipate, is to accelerate, is to translate into concrete actions the use of emerging science-driven topics. In order to reinforce the links between scientific expertise and international organization and to contribute to the restoration of multilateralism, it is also necessary to ensure that the scientific world understands the challenge facing international organization. It is also necessary for the diplomatic world to be aware of all the current development made in science that can contribute to solving current problems. This is the primary objective of the second platform, very complementary of the GESDA, which is named the Geneva Science Policy Interface. The GSPI specifically seeks to establish platforms between the actors of international Geneva and the academic world in order to promote the adoption of evidence-based policies. These two platforms, GESDA and GSPI, constitute two perfectly complementary initiatives that both work to reinforce multilateralism and to address the current and future challenges facing our society. I'm very proud that they are both located in Geneva in this campus, but open to all academic institutions in Switzerland and worldwide. I wish you a very fruitful 2 days of discovery, exchanges and interaction, and be there tomorrow at around 6 o'clock for a very important announcement that we will be able to do with ETHZ. Thank you very much and have a very good and fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.
I now welcome Martina Hirayama, Swiss Secretary of State for Education, Research and Innovation. Welcome, Madam Hirayama.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me to join the opening plenary session of the GESDA Summit. The Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipator will reflect and anticipate the need of global governance for scientific revolutions to come. Indeed, GESDA is fully in line with Switzerland's federal policy to promote education, research and innovation, ERI for short. At the core of Switzerland's ERI policy is the following. We continuously strive to offer our stakeholders from the vocational education and training sector, higher education institutions, and research and innovation communities the best possible framework conditions for an autonomous and responsible engagement. Autonomy and individual responsibility are inseparably linked. The Swiss Confederation keeps a comparatively low profile when it comes to defining the content or priorities in the fields of education, research, and innovation. We are convinced that our stakeholders are in a significantly better position to anticipate and accelerate future trends and developments. By contrast, the Confederation sees itself in close federal cooperation with the cantons, essentially as an enabler in the ERI sector. Firstly, it provides significant financial resources, around 10% of the annual federal budget, which are largely allocated competitively and are awarded based on the criteria of excellence. And secondly, ERI policy is oriented towards long-term goals, and it acts with great care regarding forward-looking legislation. There's no question that this approach has been a recipe for success until today. Countless international comparative studies and rankings pay tribute to Switzerland's high competitiveness and excellence in the fields of education, research, and innovation. But these successes and high rankings are due to the commitment of yesterday and the day before yesterday. We are aware that there is an urgency to prepare and enable developments tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. This applies not least to the challenges and opportunities of promoting more internationalization in the field of education, research, and innovation. ERI topics have always had a significant international drive. Even Erasmus of Rotterdam was, to a certain extent, globally active in the significantly smaller world of the 15th century. What is different today? Of course, is the speed with which new knowledge and know-how spreads, and how this in turn accelerates new knowledge and new know-how again. In other words, international cooperation is nowadays generally at the center of groundbreaking research results and their translation into marketable innovation. International cooperation, or at least global exchange in education, research, and innovation, is particularly indispensable in view of contemporary global challenges. Whether it is climate change and energy supply, sustainable development and migration, digitalization and economy 4.0 that serves humanity, COVID-19 and other possible epidemics, questions that are arising here can hardly be resolved alone by a small country like Switzerland, regardless how well it performs in ERI rankings. But what is clear is that Swiss ERI actors are capable and willing to tackle these topics and to make a significant contribution towards offering solutions. From this point of view, GESDA is an exciting and innovative initiative. Its location in Geneva is key, as Geneva is already a successful venue for international diplomacy. At the same time, Geneva and the Le Mans region as a whole are a cutting-edge research and innovation cluster with global appeal. This combination is unique. As a truly multilateral and interdisciplinary platform, GESDA can play an important role in anticipating future trends and developments while strengthening global governance in questions related to digitalization, climate change, artificial intelligence, and much more. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish GESDA every success in its ambitious and important endeavor to anticipate the need of global governance on a multilateral level concerning future scientific revolutions. Thank you very much.
Our final opening keynote is from Madame Tatiana Valovaya, who is the Director General of the UN Office in Geneva. Madame Valovaya, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, it is a great pleasure for me to address the Geneva Science and Diplomacy Anticipation Summit. The world is going through one of the most significant periods of advance in science and technology. We have entered the digital era with an unprecedented speed, a speed further accelerated by COVID-19 pandemics. Over the past year and a half, we have in fact transitioned and adapted to an increasingly digital reality. In this context, new technologies provided us with sound tools to face critical challenges. They help scientists and health practitioners to develop medical solutions to the pandemic. They allow children and adults to continue learning and working. They also lightened the burden of distance across separated families. And they showed us how more sustainable and inclusive lifestyles can be thanks to technology. Nevertheless, these benefits have not been equally shared across the globe. Today, around half of the world's population still lacks access to basic technologies, which often translates into drastic inequalities in terms of risks, opportunities, and vulnerabilities. Just think that half of the humanity still do not have the access to internet. The impacts of COVID-19 made this gap even wider and more apparent, thus adding to inequalities in livelihoods, income, education, social mobility, and health status. Overall, these inequalities impact one's capacity to recover and develop. This disparity is often further exacerbated by threats on privacy, security, cyber attacks, as well as matters of human rights protection, both online and offline. Moreover, some threats to our well-being as a society are yet unknown. It is one of the reasons we must work together to anticipate opportunities and mitigate risks, including through an enhanced dialogue between science and diplomacy. This bridge building is even more fundamental to help to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In this context, and in line with the strategic commitment outlined by the Secretary General of the United Nations in his strategy on new technologies, let me underline the three following points. First, together, we have to advocate for technology not to be understood as an end per se, but rather as a means to achieve the greater good for all, enshrined in the pillars of universality and inclusivity at the heart of the Sustainable Development Goals. Second, we have to protect, respect, and reinforce the different regulatory frameworks already in place to maximize the benefits and positive use of technologies for all, and to ensure the highest level of ethical standards is applied to scientific and technological progress. Third, we also have to commit to multilateralism and multi-stakeholder dialogue, cooperation, and advocacy to bridge science, policy, and society in the best interests of universal inclusivity, equality, human rights, and rule of law. In this context, I am convinced of the very important role that the rich and diverse ecosystem of Geneva can play. Not only is Geneva a unique place for multi-stakeholders dialogue on how to address these issues in a universal matter, it also offers a vast scientific expertise to help member states anticipate and tackle the opportunities and potential challenges of new technologies. In addition to science, the United Nations and many other stakeholders of this ecosystem offer unique expertise on human rights, sustainable development, health, social protection, humanitarian aid, and so many other themes of high relevance. The collective thinking and sharing of this GESDA summit is an excellent illustration of what can be done in this city. As a global community, we need to be farsighted and anticipate the scientific and technological trends of tomorrow. Our institutions must be ready to cope with a rapid outburst of new technologies and to channel their use towards the best possible outcomes. This is precisely where GESDA adds value. I am confident that this summit will help us in further tackling complex issues that will become our common tomorrow. I am convinced that discussing these issues before they arise is what will help to prepare for a sustainable, fair, and inclusive future. I wish you all an excellent discussion. Thank you.
We'll now transition to the first panel that will help us learn more about GESDA's vision. And to facilitate this conversation, let me invite on stage Mr. Michael Muller, who's the chair of the Diplomacy Forum at GESDA.
Ask our two panelists to join me. Yeah. Really? Also have one of the members online. So we've just heard of a number of people. And oh, it doesn't work. Thank you very much. So as I was saying, we've just heard a number of important messages from our leadership, from founders and from partners. And now we're also going to hear from our board. We have a really, truly excellent board made up of 9 exceptional individuals that give GESDA its direction and decides on the priority areas that we're going to be working on and that we are working on. So we felt that at the outset of this, our first summit, it would be important that you also hear from board members directly about their vision for GESDA's future and its potential impact on society and on the lives of people everywhere, and thus also give us a frame for the discussions that you're going to be listening to over the next few days. So I'm very pleased to introduce Mamogeti Phakeng online from South Africa. She's a Vice Chancellor of the University of Cape Town and a Professor of Mathematics. Welcome, Mamogeti. Can you hear us?
Hello, yes, I can.
And then I turn to Cho Chuan Tan, who is the Chief Health Scientist of Singapore and Professor of Medicine. And lastly, Sir Jeremy Farrar, the Director of the Wellcome Trust. For those of you who don't know what the Wellcome Trust is, it's the fourth wealthiest charitable foundation in the world. And he's also a medical researcher. So with these very short words, let me start by giving the floor to Mamogeti for her vision on why GESDA and what the potential impact of what our work is going to be around the world. Mamogeti.
Thank you very much, Michael. Let me start by acknowledging the founders of GESDA for the vision that they have for GESDA, because this space of dialogue that GESDA has created between science and diplomacy is incredibly important. science and technology that are advancing at a phenomenal pace, and if we do not anticipate how it is going to change us as humans, how we relate and how the world functions, then we will exacerbate the global challenges that the world is currently struggling with. Just in case we did not know it already, COVID-19 is teaching us that as people of the world, we are connected. This is irrespective of nationality, race, or religion. So it's important that we start considering the different questions that are now, before it is too late, that are here with us as science and technology advances. First, I mean, for me, what is key is the question about how will GESDA enable equity and inclusivity? What are the possible major challenges? And I think we've got lessons to learn from the challenges that we're facing with achieving the Sustainable Development Goals in Africa, which include financial resources, maintaining peace, measuring progress, and accountability. And an important aspect of our accountability is related to the ethics of potential new scientific advances, such as genetic editing. First, such development needs to include people from different demographic groups in any form of genetic and development. The pharmaceutical industry is already familiar with the tendency for different racial groups to respond differently to various products. So genetic advances need to address genetic differences in people from the global south. It is often easy to leave out people from the global south or developing world because sometimes it's difficult to reach them. And I see my role and participation in this space to ensure that we are constantly thinking about those communities. Second, such important technological advances must not be restricted only to the better resourced nations. Otherwise, we run the risk of dividing humanity into different species that are separated by genetic enhancements. This is not only unfair for all humanity, but it puts the world at risk of conflict based on genetic inequality. So just as trade is regulated through agencies like the World Trade Organizations and bilateral and multilateral treaties, there is a need for similar kinds of arrangements to regulate the application of any technology that has the potential to advance the human species. So any intervention to ensure that the developing world or Africa benefits from breakthroughs would need to also help build political will. Previous initiatives such as the USA Global Development Lab and the UK-based Newton Fund rely largely on partnerships with the private sector to address most of these challenges. However, as one analyst explains, the private sector and entrepreneurs are not a like-for-like replacement of international development and local initiatives. There are pressing needs to build infrastructure, support health and education systems, and support governance and civil society structures. And these are necessary for science to flourish and for technology to transform. So it is important for each African nation to be introduced to how science and technology are advancing fast and how they will affect them or can shape their life for the better. And perhaps for each nation to translate each of the breakthroughs into its own national plan of action that's contributing to a better future for its own peoples and by extension to a better future for the world. And so GESDA's objectives need to take into account both the historical marginalization of the developing world, and I would say in particular Africans, and their potential to contribute significantly to global development. Thanks very much, Michael.
Thank you, Mamageti. And now I turn to Chotron Tan for your vision on where we're going and what we're going to achieve.
Thank you. So it's a great honor to be on the board of with such a uplifting mission. So on one side, we have very daunting global challenges, climate change, pandemics. On the other hand, we have very exciting research discoveries. And in between, we have a long series of very deep valleys, which are very hard to traverse. And many have worked for a long time to accelerate the translation of research into solutions and technical technologies that can be applied to solve problems. But I think GESDA is unique, has a powerful vision which is different in several ways. The first is it's not just looking at translating research into solutions, but to take it beyond, to also enable those solutions to be accessible to a much wider range of communities around the world, to benefit, as has been mentioned, a much wider range of people from different countries around the world. So we need to therefore traverse more valleys, translate more cost. The second is that it takes a stringent but globally inclusive approach to identifying the most high potential research, discoveries, and science and technology, so that it creates a strong foundation, which is evidence-based, evidence-informed, upon which subsequent decisions can be confidently rested upon. And the third is, it brings together through the anticipation situation room many different stakeholders, and have those stakeholders help us understand the nature of those valleys based on how they perceive them. And that enables us, therefore, to figure out ways in which we can build the bridges together that will enable us to cross these valleys in order to reach the ultimate goal, which is to make science and technology solutions accessible and available to the maximum number of people. So this is a very complex process, but I think what has been particularly impressive has been the purposeful, the systematic, and the globally inclusive way in which the methodology is being developed to do this, so that it will allow us to replicate, to build upon, and to systematically develop better and better ways to learn how to cross all these valleys. This is a very complex undertaking. It's a very bold undertaking. My sense is that the first few bridges built might not be the best bridges, but it's a learning process, because we're not just at the end trying to build solutions. We're trying to also learn how to build those bridges in a much more systematic and a much more coherent manner that builds on the best of science and is responsive to the needs of most people in the world. So it's a very powerful mission and vision, and I'm just very privileged. I feel very privileged to be able to play a small part in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Trotwan. So Jeremy, your turn.
Thanks very much indeed. Just to add my thanks for being here, and Trotwan and I go back a long way. We're both born in Singapore, and we both did our PhDs in the same place. So we go back a long way. It's very good to be on the same panel with you. So I'm a medical doctor. My background's in emerging infections, and the progress in the last 18 months, as we heard, has been nothing short of staggering. Vaccines developed, drugs developed, new diagnostic tools developed, and science has given us the potential to transform the first pandemic of the 21st century. And yet we've really failed. Multilateralism, which sits here in Geneva, was invented here. We're at a stage now when, despite having those tools, they are only available to a certain sector of society, a certain number of countries. And so if we're going to change that, because all of the great challenges of the 21st century, I think, have common features, science and culture will help provide solutions to them. But if we end up, whether climate change or energy access, pandemics, whichever you believe to be the great challenges, if we end up with those being inequitably available globally, we won't have solved those challenges. We'll have just added to them. And I'm convinced science can play a role, but science needs to change. Science needs to accept that it cannot exist in its ivory towers. Science can no longer be in its silos of short-term thinking, chasing short-term grants. We've got to, as scientists, think beyond our own spheres and take into account what's happening in society and what is happening in other sectors of society, of science. But the diplomatic and political community, and this is not a criticism, is inevitably behind the curve in that scientific endeavor, because it can't be ahead of the curve because of all of the constraints of politics and diplomacy. And frankly, because not enough scientists go into politics and diplomacy, but it will inevitably be behind that curve. And if GESDA achieves anything, I think it will be to open the minds of scientists that they have a broader role in society, that they need to engage with and take societies with them, not assume that what scientists do will be accepted by everybody. And I think the political and diplomatic class need to embrace those scientists, not for tomorrow in the short-termism of today's politics, but to think what challenges are coming 5, 10, 25 years down the road, and what science is being done now do we need to think about in order to maximize the potential for the maximum number of people globally. We need to move away from being reactive to that change to being proactive and ahead of it, because if we're reactive, we will put in place bad regulation and we won't take societies with us. So it is, I think, at the heart of GESDA to get ahead of ourselves, to break down those silos and think, how can we make the maximum benefit of science for the maximum number of people in order to avoid the growing inequalities globally. That's why I wanted to join and was honored to join the board of GESDA.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. So the message is fairly the same along the three interventions. We have to deal with ethics, we have to deal with governance, we have to make sure that we deal with equity and inclusivity, justice, we have to be proactive, and we have to be preventive. So if Nanjira gives us a few more minutes, then I thought that it'd be useful to have just a quick round between the three of you to react to your individual interventions, if you have something to add. Mamageti, do you want anything to what you just heard from Jeremy? And
yes, perhaps to add to what Jeremy is saying, we should also ask the question, who's doing the science? Because the inclusivity doesn't only mean that we've got to make sure that the science that's been produced is used or reaches people or everyone, but it's also that people are involved in the science. When you involve the people, different communities in the science, it builds trust. The reason why we have such low trust in science is also because that many of the marginalized communities, I'll call them that, are not so involved in science. And so they don't see it as being of benefit to them. And as long as that relationship with science remains, then the trust remains low, and then we exacerbate the inequality. So I think that one of the things that we would need to advocate and make sure that happens as just that who does the science, where and how, so that we don't have science, helicopter science or whatever you call it. Thanks, Michael.
thank you very much, Margit. Short one.
I want to add that it's also important for us to look at the potentially bad impact, unintentional, that can come from scientific technologies. And in particular, to make sure that we try to mitigate this generally, and to try to make sure also that the bad side effects don't accumulate in some parts of the world rather than others. And to do that, we do need that much broader and inclusive engagement of scientists and policymakers from around the world, so that we look at the exciting potential of new technologies, but we also look at some of the things that may not be good, may have a bad impact, and try to minimize them in an equitable fashion across the communities. I think that's also an important facet of GESDA's work.
Indeed. Jeremy, the last word.
I think for me, the two things that have come through, first is trust, and you cannot build trust in a crisis. You build trust when you don't think you need to build it. It's part of everyday life. And if you try and build trust in a crisis, you'll always fail. And the second is to take a longer term approach. The world we live in today moves very quickly. Politics moves very quickly. Science moves very quickly. But we need to, at some point, be able to stand back and take a longer term perspective. Where are we likely to go in 10, 20, 25, 30 years' time? We won't get it right in the detail, but we'll probably get the trends right. And it's those trends that are more important than getting each individual detail right. And preparing for those trends, I think, is what we have to put in place. And we have to encourage our scientific, diplomatic, and political community to embrace those, not be frightened by them.
Thank you very much. So I think that through these three interventions, it's pretty clear. I hope it's clear to you that we're in good hands. That GESDA has a leadership council that is helping us to go in the right direction. Whatever solutions we're going to end up coming up with, I think that the foundation, and the intellectual foundation and the value foundation is strong, and that is really important for us to be able to do, and to do what Jeremy just said, to create the trust that is absolutely indispensable, not just in governments, but in our public, in everybody who is going to be impacted at whatever solution comes out of the work of GESDA. Now, there were several references to the Science Breakthrough Radar, and you will now be shown a short video that will precede the conversation, the next conversation on this topic. I commend it to you. I commend this radar to you really strongly. It's quite an extraordinary piece of work that my colleagues have done. I read through it yesterday and I was completely captivated. It is now open source on our website. You can, since this morning, you can go on our website, gesda.global, and access it. And I guarantee that you're going to have a fascinating read. So we will move to the video, and then as it starts playing, we'll gain our seats again. Thank you very much.
According to GESDA's vision, which is use the future to build the present, and GESDA's mission, which is to anticipate, accelerate up, and translate or broaden the benefits of science and technology, this radar has been designed to inform discussions and concerted action to accompany those forthcoming science advances. This by involving from the start, not only scientists, but also diplomats, philanthropists, entrepreneurs, civil society leaders, and the general public. This inaugural edition of the Science Breakthrough Radar extends science anticipation by also considering current debates in society. It's complemented by a section where 8 leading scholars from philosophy, the humanities, and the arts assess how these science breakthroughs will and already are shaping the way we see ourselves, relate to each other, and care for our environment. The debates chapter examines why the topics addressed by GESDA matter. They provide a synthesis of the debates in society on the current challenges facing humanity. It contains as well what is called the pulse of society, which is scanning of what people all over the world are saying in relation to the themes addressed by GESDA. It also contains an opportunities chapter as well, which answers the question, what can we do with science anticipation? This gives an insight into the global challenges such as the Sustainable Development Goals, geopolitical issues, and societal implications linked to these scientific breakthroughs. This chapter also discusses some of the trends affecting multilateralism and how science anticipation is already happening in selected international organizations. It makes the link to the summit of today so that debates in science trends can be openly discussed and lead to positive solutions for mankind. The radar has been developed through a strategic partnership with the Fondation pour Genève. A high-level scientific advisory board has been set up to accompany its development. It comprises Professor Michael Hengartner, president of the ETH board, Sir Peter David Gluckman, who's the president-elect of the International Science Council and chair of the advisory group to International Network of Government Science Advice, Professor Marie-Laure Saal, who is the director of the Graduate Institute of International and Development Studies, and last but not least, Professor Michael Mayer, who's a professor emeritus at University of Geneva and 2019 Physics Nobel Prize laureate. For a discussion on this radar, I'm joined now on stage by Mr. Hengartner, Madame Marie-Laure Saal, and also Patrick Abisher, who's the vice chairman of GESDA and former president of APFL. So for a quick discussion on the radar, Patrick, let me start with you. What are the reasons that led GESDA to conceive a science breakthrough radar, and what is GESDA trying to achieve with it?
Thank you. You know, it came from the observation as a scientist that, you know, the pace of scientific development is increasing every year. There's a phenomenal acceleration on one side. There's a second thing, which is a convergence of technologies between information technology, nanotechnology, biotechnology, cognitive science, that is affecting. I mean, science is no more in silos, but interacting. So it's even harder for scientists to really grasp the whole, you know, breadth of what is going. The third is the geographical. It was discussed before by Jeremy and Chortwan and Megeti. And I think this is also, you know, 100 years ago, everything was probably happening in Europe and in the United States. Today, it's much broadly distributed. So I think we need to bring all those actors together. If you look at the scientific development of Asia, for example, of China, you cannot do it without it today. And I think this is going to even further develop in the years to come. And I would say the last thing is also the actors. A lot of the breakthrough discovery, the disruptive, are still happening in academic settings with public resources. But you cannot avoid to think that some of it, for example, in AI, in artificial intelligence, is also happening in private institutions, in the GAFAs, that have recruited some of the top AI people so that they need to be brought into the discussion. And that's what we've done through the radar, is to bring all the actors. That's one thing. The second thing, which is quite unusual in science, it's exactly what Jeremy was saying. You know, we're very comfortable in saying what we do and what we might do next year or the following year. But it's less comfortable for us to say where we see our, disciplines going in 5, 10, or 25 years. But I think we have to give those trends, because probably some of those top scholars are the best people to tell us where the trends are going, so that society can prepare itself to integrate those, to frame them, so as to get them to be used by the many that we can. And at the same time, as George Han was saying, I think there are things that we should probably prevent to do, prevent to use, prevent to apply. But I think scientists are not the right people to do this. However, we're critical to say what is happening today and where we think this will happen. But we have to share this knowledge with the society in general, with the policymakers, with the philanthropists, with the entrepreneurs, but again, for the society. And that was really the rationale behind. The second thing is also, science doesn't stop, it continuously evolves. So we had the concept of having a rolling system. So once a year, we will readapt and tell you where we think things are going. And some may go faster, some slower, some maybe unexpected things will happen, because this is also part of science. So I think what we want to do is to provide what I call the raw material for the policy people and society to be aware of and come sufficiently early with policies that can ensure the good utilization of science discoveries. And I think this is really at the heart. So what we want to do, what we want to be, is an honest broker between the science and society in general, and with the policymakers as the people that will do this. And there's probably no better place to do it in the world than Geneva, with the United Nations, the international organization, the NGOs, and world-class research institution. And that's really the whole purpose of it. So now this is done. This is a beta version. There's more than 500 top scholars that have contributed to tell us, for example, where quantum computing will be in 5 years, in 10 years. How should we use it? It's never perfect. It will never be perfect. But that's the status of today. So first we have to increase the number of people that will participate, and we will have to adapt it continuously. But this is, I think, a very critical tool for the world of tomorrow, for the world to be prepared with the discoveries that are happening. What I was saying, what is cooking in the laboratories of science today, so that we can use it for the best of our species.
Thank you for that. Michael, 216 breakthroughs predicted between 5, 10, and 25 years are listed. But science evolves really rapidly. How do we ensure this radar stays up to date?
Patrick already mentioned, we plan to have an annual update. We will see what happens. There might be new things that will pop out on the horizon. Some things might take more time. Some things might rush towards us at a much faster pace. And so we need to keep our eyes open and continuously question ourselves and our hypotheses. I think it's important to realize we're not making predictions about the future. We're simply looking at potential scenarios. But because these scenarios have such a tremendous potential impact on humanity, it's important that we start discussing them now and seeing what the implications could be. And so that's the science radar simply sketches out the possible scenarios, the tools that might become available to humanities for good or bad in the years to come.
Thank you for that. Marie-Laure, the radar describes how scientists in the field anticipate impactful advances at 5, 10, and 25 years. But science does not happen in a vacuum, and it evolves in broader societal and political contexts. How can the radar take this into account for GESDA to translate the science anticipation into meaningful initiatives?
So just thank you very much, and good afternoon to all of you. Let me actually back up a bit and go back to actually what is technology, what is science. I mean, technology and science historically with the history of humanity is connected to humanity. It is a construction of humanity. And from the very beginning, science and particularly technology have been gifted with two sides, a side that has been increasing the well-being of humanity. Think about Phi as one of the, when Phi gets mastered by humans, it becomes a technology. Phi brings warmth, it allows you to cook food and has a lot of positive consequences for humanity. And on the other hand, Phi allows you to actually burn the village of the guy next door. So technology has always had this double case, and this has been discussed a lot in the previous session and with the previous speakers. Today we are reaching, so there's an invariant here, but we are reaching a certain breakthrough or a certain moment of having to really rethink all this. Why? Because over the last decades, at least in the words, maybe not yet in reality, but at least in the words, we've heard this notion that scientific breakthrough would be the means to actually overcome humanity, to get beyond humanity. Transhumanism is really this idea. And so this is really, we're certainly actually moving to a very different world where scientific breakthrough are envisioned as a way to overcome humanity. On the other hand, since the beginning of these sessions, we've heard that the idea here is to really stay within this notion of science and technology as being the tools for the well-being, and more than that, it's been said repeatedly, the well-being of the larger groups of humans on Earth, if possible. So a very inclusive notion of that, okay? So I think that's really one of the reasons why it is very important for us to take those questions and to take them very seriously and to take them very collectively. Now, I want to go to what is dear to my heart, which is the role of social sciences in all this, okay? Because we've been hearing that we have on the one hand those breakthroughs, on the other hand we have this project, which is the well-being of the largest share of humanities and the SDGs. That's kind of a way to summarize that. And we've heard about those valleys of translations. And this is where I think the role of social sciences is key. Because the valleys have been described. It's about trust, it's about governance, it's about ethics, the limits of all this. And so this is really where we're not talking about politics yet. We're talking about social scientific innovations that need to be brought to talk with the type of tool that we have now with the radar. So we need to bring those two things together in certain ways. We need to find the mechanisms where we have social scientists talk with hard scientists and find the mechanisms to do that. But actually an even further step for me is when we will be able, and this will be actually accelerating this overcoming of the valleys, is when we are able to in fact bring the hybridization in the production of the science. So bring this hybridization of social science, ethics, humanities, at the beginning of the production of science, which implies obviously a lot of things in terms of education of the next generations, both of scientists, social scientists, but also diplomats, etc. And for me, this is where I think we really have to go from tech for good, as I like to say, to good in tech. So this is really a major, actually paradigmatic revolution, and it will be hopefully the next step for GESDA.
Thank you so much for that. Now, as you've heard, this radar is a partnership with Fondation pour Genève, and I'll invite to the floor Mr. Marc Pictet to give us some closing remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear Peter, dear friends, for more than a century, International Geneva has greatly contributed to the search for solution to the major challenges we are facing. Today, GESDA, Breakthrough Radar, has the potential to help shape the future of modern multilateralism and transform International Geneva. Science diplomacy is the future. There is no doubt that science and technology will play an increasingly important role in determining the future of humanity. But as we just heard, science needs to change. It needs to involve the communities. Science needs to be broader and more inclusive. So by bringing together different communities and identifying the scientific breakthrough, we can accelerate the implementation of the 17 UN SDGs and contribute to a fairer, more secure and harmonious world. At this point, I would like to acknowledge the exceptional work of the numerous scientists and diplomats who developed and realized the GESDA radar. I also would like to highlight the strong commitment of Geneva's private sector, which had this ambitious project become reality. GESDA, created by the Swiss Confederation and the Canton, and supported by the city of Geneva, is yet another illustration of a successful public-private partnership, fostering dynamic and forward-looking ecosystem in Geneva. The Fondation pour Genève, celebrating this year its 45th anniversary, is proud to support GESDA, this bold undertaking. Over the next few months, we will be launching a series of publications and roundtables aiming at communicating with the public, the local community, on this new instrument. This will be directed by Professor Michel Mayer, 2019 Nobel Prize in Physics and scientific advisor to our foundation, to GESDA. Ladies and gentlemen, International Geneva belongs to all of us. Scientists, diplomats, business leaders, civil society, public and private sectors. It is only by uniting our forces and networks that we will make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Monsieur Pictet, and thank you as well to our panelists who have given us more insight into the radar panel. As you will find out, there are various ways to discover the platform. There will be QR stickers that are distributed all over the place that you can scan and access the radar virtually. But for those who prefer good old school books, there'll be print copies of the radar that will be distributed at the exit of the building. For now, we'll take a 15-minute break and enjoy your time